Hi guys, welcome to this session where we're going to be going through some of the sample papers, or rather this sample paper of the Requirements Engineering, the BCS Requirements Engineering course. So this will just help you to understand how the questions are asked and get you familiar with them and how we are expected to answer them. So if you go through all of these questions, and hopefully what it'll do is it'll familiarize you with the style that they're actually asking the questions in, and it'll also show you some ways of actually connecting what you have learned from what you've actually studied to the actual exam. So whenever you encounter questions such as this in your exam, or these different types of questions, you'll know how to answer them. Okay, so the first question that we are going to be covering here is question 1. And what I always like to do is I first like to read the question. And while I'm reading the question, I'm getting a bit of a context about the scenario, the situation that they're actually asking for, and or the situation that they're placing you in, or asking you for some information about this particular scenario. And then what I also need to do while I'm going through it is try to identify some techniques or some area of knowledge. What are the keywords that are sort of indicating that this is a particular area of knowledge from your studies and from your syllabus? And how do these relate to specific learning objectives from your syllabus? So if you know all of this information and you read these types of questions, it'll be a lot clearer. But the way that they're actually asking these questions in this practitioner level course, such as the Modeling Business Processes courses or the Business Analysis Practice, and this one, the Requirements Engineering course, what they are doing is they're testing your knowledge on your practical application of what you've learned. So because this is a practitioner course and it's requirements engineering, and requirements engineering is such a big part of business analysis, it's where we actually go and define the requirements for a particular system. That is a large part of the job that a business analyst would do. So therefore, they would place you in these particular contexts where you would be using this information from your studies. So let's read through this question and see if we can identify any information or any keywords that is indicating what they're testing us on here, which will reveal the answers. And you'll only really reveal the answers if you've actually done enough study and revision so that you know what they're talking about. So always go through all of your courseware. Don't just watch the videos or the lessons only once. What you need to do is actually take your own notes, review those notes, and any areas that you feel like you don't understand or a little bit shaky about, go back to those areas and ensure that you cover them before your exam. Because a lot of students are reporting that these BCS exams, especially at practitioner level, are quite difficult. So ensure that you know your stuff, and then you'll easily be able to tie the question. Not always easy, but you'll be able to much easier. You'll find it a lot easier to actually identify the correct answers. Okay, so what they are saying here is that there's a business analyst is working on a project that requires extensive investigation of the current situation. They need to collect a limited amount of data from a wide range of stakeholders and understand stakeholders' responses to a range of particular circumstances and processes. Due to the nature of the organization, these stakeholders are based in various locations around the world and usually communicate via video conference. Which of the following pairs of investigation techniques would best meet the analyst's needs? Then we have A, which is scenario analysis and observation, B, scenario analysis and interviews, C, document analysis and interviews, and then D, interviews and observations. Okay, so there's several areas of this particular question here where they've identified which area of knowledge, which part of the syllabus that they're actually testing you on here. And even in the first line, they mention investigation of the current situation. So investigation. And then in the final instruction, they say which of the following pairs of investigation techniques which would best meet the analyst's needs. And all of those options there in the answers are actual investigation techniques. So it's very obvious here that they're asking us about investigation techniques. So firstly, what do we know about investigation techniques in the context of requirements engineering? We know that investigation techniques are used throughout all of the business analysis areas, because a large part of business analysis work is actually talking to people, investigating situations, communicating with in different ways, and in different using different methods to communicate with people. Because we need to be able to understand the situation, we need to be able to extract information for whichever purpose it is. We may be just understanding the context of the organization right in the beginning. We may be trying to understand or identify particular opportunities to improve the business. We may be trying to investigate problems within the business. We may be trying to investigate particular opportunities, maybe even in processes or even at a strategic level. But in the context of requirements engineering, we use investigation techniques to elicit requirements and also to maybe validate requirements. Throughout this whole process of engineering requirements, we need to be able to talk to people effectively. We need to be able to investigate in these various contexts and situations. You maybe even in the first instance, you've been contracted to develop the documentation for a particular system, maybe a software product, or if it's a business system, then it may be some other transformational change that the organization is undertaking. But you ultimately have to define the requirements for this transformation. Most of the time, it's at a system level, it's a technical requirement, it's from the technical perspective. And most of the time these days, it's from a perspective of a particular software product or some sort of a technical solution. So you would then have to define the specific requirements or the user stories for a software product or some sort of an IT solution. So in this instance, you have to actually speak to people about this. You have to speak to various people in the organization. You need to be able to talk to them and find out what the system must do and where it needs to be improved. How must it change from the previous system, or what needs to be built into the new system? And we may then start off at the beginning. We may talk to these maybe high-level stakeholders, such as the executives of the organization or the business. And we now start eliciting those general requirements and sort of getting a bit of a context about what the system should do on a more of a broad category. And then we've sort of slowly move forward, and we then start getting more information about where we should also get additional information, where we should elicit other requirements for the organization or for the system. They may indicate that there's a particular team, there's a particular department, maybe there's certain business staff that actually carry out a process on the system, maybe they're even developers. But we'll have to go and talk to these different people. And these investigation techniques allow us to investigate and talk to these people, communicate with them effectively. And each of the investigation techniques have their pros and cons. They have their advantages and disadvantages. And we need to know an effective business analyst or effective requirements engineer needs to know which ones should be used in different contexts. Because if you're sitting in a situation where there is a large amount of people, there's thousands of people that work for the organization, can you imagine going on an individual basis and interviewing every single person to maybe get some broad category of information? In this context, maybe it might just be more useful to conduct a survey. And it also depends on the type of information that you're extracting too. So you need to know which particular technique, which particular investigation technique should be used in each scenario. And this is where your specialism comes into play. So that's why you need to go to that particular area of your course. In the requirements engineering course, the investigation techniques are covered in module 3. So you can actually go through all of those items, and there's a lot more investigation techniques too. So it's useful to put these techniques, these communication methods in your business analysis toolbox and choose them when you actually need them. Choose the right tools for the job. Okay, so we know what they're asking us about here. Now we need to understand the context and try identify some keywords or some statements that are helping us identify what the correct answer is here. So it's obvious that we need to identify a pair or one or two investigation techniques that will be most useful for this particular context, because we've got scenario analysis and we've got observation. We've got scenario analysis and interviews. We've got document analysis and we've got interviews. And we've got interviews and observations. Okay, so what we can see there is that there's some that are common across the board, such as there's interviews in 3 of the items, there's observations in 2, and let's now see if we can identify some keywords for this to help us identify what this the correct answer is here. Okay, so also we must remember that requirements are qualitative or quantitative. So are we just extracting some general information, or are we extracting some specific data or something like that? But in the context of elicitation, requirements elicitation, it's mainly on the basis of eliciting requirements, those specific statements, or getting to a point of where we have these specific statements that will allow us to define the new system that is to be built. Okay, so it says here, they need to collect a limited amount of data from a wide range of stakeholders. Okay, firstly, let's look at this. So they need to collect, so they're collecting information. They're collecting data. So this is maybe for the new system. This is maybe part of requirements engineering. And it must be done from a wide range of stakeholders. Okay, but the key word here I can see is limited data. So a limited data from a wide range of stakeholders. So if we were extracting a large amount of data, we would think that we would need to use techniques that were more efficient. So we need to now start considering the budget and the time and those types of things, that the time required to actually get this information. But because it's a limited amount of information, maybe carrying out an interview won't be such a problem. But we see that there's still a wide range of stakeholders. So maybe potentially we'd need to use a representative from a group. Okay, so a wide range of stakeholders. If we use a focus group, that's not going to quite work because we need more of a broader context in this case. If we're going to use an observation, that's also not going to work because it's a wide range of people and we're going into these sessions and we're observing people. So it seems like an observation won't quite work here, and it seems like maybe some shadowing techniques won't work. And now document analysis. So maybe document analysis. Are we analyzing documents? I'm not too sure. Let's read a little bit further. So it says we need to understand the stakeholders' response to a range of particular circumstances and processes. Okay, so what we know about interviews is about getting people's perspectives, their individual perspectives. So in this context, it would seem that an interview would be most likely to be used here because we're getting different perspectives. So we're getting particular circumstances and processes and understand stakeholders' responses. So if we need to understand a response, it's more inclined to be maybe talking to someone on a one-on-one basis. But maybe what we'd have to do is we'd have to select people from different groups and get their responses for this particular situation. But let's read on a little bit further. Let's say, due to the nature of the organization, these stakeholders are based in various locations around the world and usually communicate via video conference. Okay, so this now is indicating that to go to a particular location might be problematic. But here we actually can use video conferencing software, which would actually also indicate here that maybe this is an interview. So we may be carrying out interviews across the organization with different stakeholders that are in these different locations. And we can do this using this video conferencing software. We're not going to be carrying out observations because it's unlikely if they're going to be communicating via video conference and there's all these different locations. We're not going to be carrying out workshops because we would have to maybe carry out various workshops in various video conferencing centers, but workshops need to be facilitated. And in this case, we're looking for these certain perspectives, these particular circumstances and processes. We need their responses. And in a workshop, as you imagine, it's all more of a consensus view. People are you facilitating that these people are all going to come together and maybe make a decision together or facilitate some sort of a response from them. But if we're looking for these particular circumstances, this is more inclined to be an interview. And an observation is incorrect, so we can actually rule out answer A. We can rule out answer D. And now we've got B and C, which is scenario analysis and interviews. And we've got document analysis and interviews. Okay, so maybe facilitating this particular situation, it says that it says that the organization is based in various locations. And they can do this via video conferencing. They need to collect a limited amount of data from a wide range of stakeholders. Maybe what we need to be doing in this situation, because scenario analysis assists us with a stakeholder understanding the context and understanding the particular situation. So if you look at the context of that, it says, and understand stakeholders' responses to a range of particular circumstances and processes. This now is indicating that scenario analysis would be a better answer over document analysis, because a document analysis may be where we're sitting with these stakeholders and we're going through documentation to generate responses from them. But if we want these stakeholders to understand a particular situation, that's where we would use scenarios, and it would assist us and the stakeholders to go through this, maybe a fictitious scenario, maybe discussing a particular process or particular event that takes place in the organization to help them generate a response. And in this particular instance, we know that interviews are probably the most likely answer here, and scenarios are the most likely answer here. So B is the correct answer. Video conferencing software would very easily facilitate that. We can carry out these interviews over long distances. Okay, so answer B is the correct answer here. This was a little bit of a tricky one. They didn't directly maybe mention any of the advantages or disadvantages of these various techniques. But for this one, we had to maybe use our gray matter a little bit here and try and decide which of these is the best option. Observations definitely wouldn't have worked. So it was more a process of elimination here. So we're eliminating the answers that had observations in them, because observations wouldn't quite have helped us in this particular situation. That would have been more in the context of understanding the particular work that takes place in the organization, and it doesn't quite lend itself to that. So the particular the observing the staff themselves that are carrying out this particular thing. But in this case, we're looking for stakeholders' responses. So this is interviews and scenario analysis. So I hope if you encounter questions such as this, we'll always be using the same technique by reading the question, trying to identify which area of knowledge that we are being tested on here, which technique is it, what do we know about our studies. So when we identify what that broad category is, we can then start placing everything else within the context of this question, because these are very scenario-based questions. What would you do, or what would this person do in this particular instance, or what would be the best selection here? So this is the style of questioning at the practitioner level. Okay, so I hope to see you in the next question, and keep practicing your sample papers, keep going through this information, go through all your study material, and you'll get there. Okay, so I'll see you in the next question. Goodbye.